Well, hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to RaceSpot TV and welcome back to the PCA Challenge class. This is round number 5 of the season, coming to you tonight from Aragon. My name is Ron Mullins, flying solo tonight here in the commentary booth. Hugo Luis is our producer for tonight's broadcast. We're thrilled to have Princess Cruises as the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 14, they provide exclusive offers including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 17 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. Well, with all the business taken care of, let's shift off into tonight, the 5th round of what has been a fantastic season here in the challenge class for the Porsche Club of America. This adventure that began all the way back in early September at Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps has seen us go to some absolutely amazing global racing venues. Watkins Glen after that, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Laguna Seca last time out, and here tonight at Aragon to kick off was going to be a fantastic run to the checkered flag here for this season. Zoller and VIR to follow in the weeks ahead, but here at Aragon, which we expect it to be a tough race, and it's going to be one with the rain still a factor. But before we move off into the race, let's take a look at the championship point standings as we head off into this round of the championship. Ed Trippett is your current championship points leader. 930 points is his tally at the present moment. It's a tie for P2 between Johan Nye and Antonio Da Silva. Those two racers probably gonna have that tie broken between now and the very end of this championship. And Anthony DiVincenzo is slotted in 4th at the moment. James Legault is in 5th. Robert Gales in 6th. John Kaplan in 7th. Jeffrey Block, Todd Goldberg, and Adam Holland complete your top 10 here in these challenge class standings. This season has been absolutely fantastic. Expecting about the same here at Aragon, and I mentioned it a few moments ago, and I'll bring it up once again here at Aragon. All throughout these past couple of weeks here in the PCA world, rain has been a factor, and we have seen it be varied amounts throughout these races, so expecting the same sort of deal here in this challenge class race tonight. Currently in the midst of qualifying as we run on board with Thomas Doherty with a slideways moment as he heads his way onto this massively long back flat-out blast here on Aragon. This track, one of the newer ones added into iRacing, if my memory serves me correctly, is one that doesn't get a lot of love on this service. I recounted the tale during last week's PCA broadcast. I'll bring it up yet again now with a different number. This is my 3rd time ever broadcasting here a race of this racetrack. It doesn't get a lot of love on iRacing, which I think is a bit of a shame, despite the fact it's designed for motorcycles. I think it puts on some absolutely amazing racing, expecting the rain to play a huge factor in this one as well. So we see Doherty come across the line here in a few moments time. He's currently slotted in 3rd with Ed Trippett holding on to the pole position right now. Let's see if it can eat away at that 1 second gap here in qualifying. Survey says that he will, but will not be able to jump in front of Les Carmichael, your current driver, slotted in P2. Looking through the rest of the top 5, we got Chris Drankovic slotted in P4, and Johan Nye completing your top 5. Keith Markuson in the 076 car about to come across the line, the number 17 in the 076 car, currently slotted in 16th, I should say. As he comes across the line, does not improve his spot. Here's David Sauntry, hits the wall on pit entry, heading around the final turn. A very long, sweeping bend to bring this lap to a conclusion will most certainly be a factor throughout the racing action here tonight. As Vern Messer comes across the line, he's currently slotted in P15. Only a minute and 17 seconds left here in this session, so it's certainly crunch time here at Aragon. John Kaplan gonna head his way into the final braking zone right at the end of this lap to try and set one more quick time here in this session. As yet to set a time that's on the board. Got to worry about the track limits here in this qualifying session with the limitations that these racers have. Can be a little bit tough just to even set a qualifying time, let alone set one that's super quick. He jumps up to P13 though. Storm of a lap from John Kaplan to get a lap on the board with less than a minute left to go here in this qualifying session. But as I just said, Ed Trippett, your current provisional pole sitter, doesn't look like anybody is going to get close to him yet, as it's currently 0.933 of a second between himself and your provisional front row starter of Les Carmichael. We'll see what Adam Holland can do though in the 144 car as he heads his way around the final turn, technically marked off as 2 turns on the iRacing track map. Not going to improve his time as he pulls off into pit lane. We'll decide to call it a qualifying session from there. Here's Patrick Augrey as he heads his way all through the start finish straightaway right now. What can he set in the number 13 car? I don't believe that lap time counted, so that will just about do it for him here in this session, a solo session. So as soon as that clock strikes 0, everybody's going to get abducted back into pit lane, and we'll have to switch our attention into the rest of the evening here tonight. Gonna be a fun one, going to be an exciting race for sure. And to get it all up and rolling, let's take a look at the starting grid, where Ed Trippett is going to be at the front here. The first pole position for him here in this season of Challenge Class competition. He will be joined on the front row by your pole sitter at Spa of Les Carmichael. Thomas Doherty will start this race in third. Alongside him will be Chris Drankovitz in the 009 car. Johan Nye will start in fifth. Alongside him will be Robert Galis. Looking right behind on row number 4, it's Anthony DiVincenzo right alongside James Legault. Andrew Hillman will start alongside Jeffrey Block, completing your top 10. Ben Whitehurst will start in 11th. Alongside him will be Alex Lidback. And then looking right behind on row number 7 will be John Kaplan alongside Leon Snyman. It's Dave Jones in 15th, Vernon Messer in 16th, Keith Markison in P17, Patrick Augrey in P18. And then looking right behind, riding at your top 20 is Jack Stevenson alongside Lisa Eskridge. Andy McCune will start this race in 21st. Alongside him will be David Santry. Ken Eskridge will start in 23rd alongside Adam Holland in P24. And one last starter, that being Chris Schussler in the number 61 car. The driver going to be starting this race in P25. The rear gunner of this field here. But before we move off into the race, let's take a look at this pole lap from Ed Trippett in the 444 car as he heads his way down the start-finish straightaway off into turn number 1. We saw last week in the rain, turn 1 being a really tricky braking zone. Try and nail down. You got a lot of runoff area, but in an ideal world, you wouldn't want to use it. Now, heading off through the tight twisties of this racetrack, it's turn number 2, feeding right into turn number 3. These medium-speed right-handed sweepers can be a little bit tough here in these Porsche Cup cars, but Trippett negotiating it perfectly. Now through the kink of 4 into the hairpin-esque turn of turn number 5. A slow part of this racetrack in the early stages, but building up speed once again. A brief building of speed as you have to drop the anchors once again into turn number 7. You can see how delicately Trippett is having to try and position his car around this track. We saw some mixed conditions throughout this weekend here in this qualifying session. It was just very damp out there on the racetrack, really. The not so happy medium between being too wet for dry tires and too dry for wet tires, but he was able to negotiate the middle sector beautifully as he heads his way off through 9 and 10, heading his way onto the back straightaway right now. That flat out blast ranging from 10 all the way through into the braking zone at turn number 13, possibly going to be the longest that we see from the entirety of this season here in PCA competition. So we'll have to keep an eye on that all throughout this race to see what these competitors can do in the draft. Building up the speed, see him all the way in 6th gear, may try and slightly tickle the rev limiter as he heads his way into that braking zone right about now. Can be a little bit disorienting with the track running off a little bit farther along to a hairpin that creates one of the other car configurations of this track. But here on the motorcycle layout, we have this long and left-handed sweeper to bring this lap to a conclusion, and Trippett delicate on the steering wheel, having to saw that car around, and he puts in a very good time to jump his way up into the pole position. As I said, it is Trippett's first pole here in PCA competition this season. He joins the list of now 5 different pole sitters in Challenge Class competition. I mentioned it during the starting grid graphic. Les Carmichael was able to grab the pole in round number 1 of the season at Spa. Antonio Da Silva was your pole sitter the following race at Watkins Glen. Vernon Messer started from the pole at Indianapolis. Laguna Seca had Todd Goldberg starting from the pole, and here at Aragon is going to be Ed Trippett starting this race from the pole position here. Looking at right now here, trying to get a bit more time in this warm-up session, get his footing in right for what is going to be a pretty tough race here this season. He was actually a winner at Indianapolis, and although that race was not wet, the track conditions were still not great. It wasn't rainy there at Indy because all the rain had evaporated. Boiling hot track conditions during the rounds at Indianapolis, but Trippett was able to prevail at the Yard of Bricks and was able to grab his first and so far only win here this season. Keep an eye on everybody else throughout this field. It's been a very competitive start to this season here for Series 14 of the PCA Challenge Class. We've got to keep an eye on all of these racers as the season continues to progress. as Anthony DiVincenzo in the 420 car, the other driver from the New York region, currently out there on the racetrack here in this warm-up session. We've kind of mentioned him being a sneaky favorite to maybe grab a victory between now and the end of the championship. I think he has some good speed in that 420 car. We'll have to see if this very challenging race tonight here at Aragon could be the spot where that driver can break through and get his first victory here this season. I've only seen one repeat winner thus far here in the challenge class, that being Todd Goldberg, who managed to grab a victory at Watkins Glen and was also your race winner last time out at Laguna Seca. So we'll have to keep an eye on all of these racers as a checkered flag is now out here in this warm-up session, and we'll get off into the race here in just a couple of moments' time. We talked about PCA a little bit earlier on, but I do want to give some personal love to something that the PCA loves as well, that being water, which whenever you're doing a solo show is most certainly your best friend. It's not going to be the best friend of these racers as the rain is now falling down. Before we get this race up and rolling, the drivers going to be lining up on the back straightaway to get this short pace lap underway. Gotta worry about the track and tire temperatures here tonight as well. Gonna be a tough one for these competitors all throughout. Speaking of those track conditions, you can see them right now. 89% on the humidity. Can't necessarily say that that's a shock considering that the rain is coming down. Frankly, I'm surprised it's not as high as 100%. Currently 24 degrees Celsius as the ambient temperature, 26 C as the track temp. Mostly cloudy, which is part of the reason why that ambient and track temp are so inseparable. Only 2 degrees C as a difference between those. So really gonna have to see how these racers can cope with the challenge and cope with the difficulties that will most certainly be plentiful here throughout tonight's broadcast on RaceSpot TV. And if you are enjoying tonight's broadcast and the action that you're about to see, how about you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss out on any of the racing action, because we're gonna have a very frenetic evening of action about to get up and rolling here in just a few moments time. The drivers rolling on this formation lap. Gotta worry about that runoff down into turn number 1. That was a tricky spot for many a racer throughout this week, having to stomp on the brakes heading down into 1. I talked about it in the track guide when we look at the pole lap from Ed Trippett, and will most certainly be a source of trouble for these racers once we get tonight's action up and rolling. But here we go, folks. About to get round number 5 of this PCA Challenge Class season up and rolling here for Series 14. It's been a fun one. It's been a challenging one. Been technical for these racers, but this may be the toughest task yet. Waiting for that green flag to come out with the pace car down in pit lane. Ed Trippett gonna lead us to green. As a green flag is out, the drivers are on their way, and we're racing tonight here at Aragon. A clean run for everybody as they head their way down into turn number 1. Keep an eye on Trippett, a bit of a wiggle through the braking zone, but he's gonna pull out to a commanding lead early. Everybody else negotiating the first turn clean. Let's see what they can do throughout the rest of the first lap. Side-by-side racing was going on between Thomas Doherty and Les Carmichael. Carmichael has had to slip back in tow, currently running in third as Doherty has been able to jump into that second spot. Johan Nye currently running in fourth as we look at some side-by-side racing going on a little bit farther behind. John Kaplan and Alex Lidbeck, he finds himself in the midst of a bit of a hornet's nest, if we are being honest. Got Leon Snyman right behind, Lidbeck right in front, and a whole other host of racers all around each other. Side-by-side racing, I think, going on a little bit farther behind, involving Andy McCune and Patrick Augury. I believe there has been a swap-roo, another swap-roo, in fact, between those two drivers, completing your top 20 at the present moment. In fact, there they are, side-by-side, between the small little flat-out blast into turn number 8, right at turn 7, and keep an eye on that number 13 car, the Lone Star Region Racer, trying to get off to as good of a start that he possibly can, and he takes that spot. Well done, as Lisa Eskridge now having to worry about a battle between herself and Adam Holland. That's a battle for 21st as they head their way onto the back straightaway. Meanwhile, up at the front, Ed Trippett has been able to jump out to a 1.3 second gap over Thomas Doherty, who's been able to jump out to nearly 7/10 of a second gap himself between he and Les Carmichael. Johan Nye running in fourth with Robert Galis, completing her top 5 as they head their way down the back straightaway for the very first time. Looking at side-by-side racing going on here, involving Andrew Hillman trying to make something work as it's side-by-side racing with himself and Anthony DiVincenzo all through turn number 13 and 14, not able to get that move done in that number 6 car. He remains not very fittingly in P7. Side-by-side racing gonna go on here. That's the battle for P2 between Les Carmichael and Thomas Doherty. Carmichael goes for the dive into 1, still stuck on the outside through 2, but I think he'll be able to get that move done in a commanding way. Doherty now gonna have to worry about getting his bearings straight and worry about a possible challenge from Johan Nye, who's there looming in the background about a half a second behind Trippett. Going to utilize that as a fantastic opportunity to continue to drive off farther into the distance. But as we continue to see these racers tackle the early stages, it has been a very clean start here at Aragon. That's running wide a little bit farther behind. Robert Gallus running into P5 at the moment, runs off into the asphalt runoff area. May have to worry about Anthony DiVincenzo and Andrew Hillman applying some pressure to the back of him. He's slotted in 5th at the moment in that 809 car, but can't afford to have more moments like that. It was a simple lockup, I'm sure, heading down into turn number 7, just running a little bit wide, as these track conditions, it must be said, seem to be getting a heck of a lot worse. The rain that started off as a light trickle has really turned into a flood. The standing water around this racetrack becoming more and more commonplace as these racers going to try and battle the storm, battle the track conditions, and battle themselves in these very unideal conditions. Riding on board with Andrew Hillman in the number 6 car as he heads his way down the back straightaway. Looks like Anthony DiVincenzo thinks about going for a move on the outside of Robert Gallus, heading down to turn number 14. This is a spot where you really just want to apply some pressure to your competitors and force them into a mistake instead of trying to get that spot yourself. When it comes to rain racing, I say this as somebody who adored racing in the rain back in my very own karting days. You gotta play both sides. You gotta play the offense and the defense. You gotta go for the moves, really try and stake claim on battles, but you also gotta block hard as side-by-side racing gonna flare up with Anthony DiVincenzo trying to go for the move on Robert Gallus. Side-by-side racing gonna go on between these two all through 1 and 2. Gallus able to shake off the challenge from DiVincenzo like a bad case of the fleas. He still holds on to P5, but the battling will still be intense between these two between now and the very end. I am absolutely sure of it. DiVincenzo still got to try and apply the pressure to the back of that 809 car and also keep their eyes peeled to Andrew Hillman. We saw him trying to apply some pressure to DiVincenzo himself earlier on. As much as that has cooled off considerably compared to what was a few laps ago, still got to keep our eyes on that. And also keep an eye on James Legault, who's involved in that battle too. Meanwhile, the battling for second once again hot between Thomas Doherty and Les Carmichael. Now side-by-side racing all through 8 and 9. Contact made, and Doherty gonna go for a half spin. Carmichael bumps him back into a straight line blast, but now Doherty, who was briefly into second, gonna have to worry about feeling the pressure from Johan Nye, who in all of that, I think he's had to check up quite a lot himself. He may have to worry about the pressure from the pack of Gallus, DiVincenzo, Hillman, and Legault behind. Really seeing a convergence of race cars as we get farther along in this race, now officially past 5 minutes in. As we continue to see the racing developing out there on the circuit, you can see the conditions developing too, and these racers, even though the track conditions are getting even more inhospitable, they're going for some gutsier moves. Gallus and DiVincenzo side by side. Gallus runs wide. That's going to yield that spot to DiVincenzo. He jumps his way up into P5. Meanwhile, Jeffrey Block and James Legault were side by side as they headed their way down the back straight into turn number 13 and 14. It looks like Jeffrey Block has been able to jump his way into that spot. Legault now holding on to P8, but he's not going to want to stay there for much longer. He goes for the dive, goes really deep into the turn, and that's not going to work out. He loses out in that spot to Jeffrey Block, and going to have to worry about Ben Whitehurst right behind Whitehurst. Meanwhile, as his own troubles with John Kaplan made trying to apply some pressure to him as he ran wide himself, heading down into the turn number 1. Jumping back to the front of this train, though, Robert Gallus and Andrew Hillman holding on to P6 and 7 at the current moment. Anthony DiVincenzo has utilized that opportunity after getting that moved on Gallus to just drive off into the sunset. Gallus really going to feel the burn as we get a little bit farther along in this race. But just to touch on the evolution of the track conditions, I wonder, Hugo, if it is at all possible if it could pop up those track conditions screens so these viewers can see the evolution that has gone on. Ambient temperature around about the same, still at 24°C, but the track temperature has dropped down 3°C just fast in the first 7 minutes of this race already, as that was contact heading down into turn number 7, involving Adam Holland. He's involved in the battle for P18 at the current moment, as himself and Dave Jones currently duking after that spot at Holland. And I believe that's a Rexy-inspired car with the teeth on the grill, taking a bite out of this competition with that contact heading down into turn number 7. And just to wrap up on the point that I was raising there, the track conditions have really gone worse for the wear. You can see the puddles on the inside turn number 10 and 11 for these racers to worry about. The standing water is getting bad. These track conditions have gone from what was certainly wet, but a manageable level of dampness out there on the racetrack. Now it's getting to the point where it's a full-on flood. So these competitors have to stay on their toes as this track continues to change, continues to evolve, and these racers will have to change their driving style throughout. As Jeffrey Block gonna try and go on the offense, tries to go for a move on Andrew Hillman into 1, but not gonna make it work. He backs out of it. One thing about turn number 1 that I saw last week here in the PCA is the various different lines that people can take off through there. Rather fascinating to note. On modern racetracks, you don't usually see opportunities for racers to take completely different lines from one another. This track, though, especially in the rain, I mean, you throw rain in the midst of any racetrack and you're going to see everybody get a bit more experimental. But around turn number 1, you can find many different optimal lines for yourself. It really just depends on your own driving style. So we'll certainly be seeing what these racers can do with the stuff they have at their hands between now and the very end. Meanwhile, up in the front edge, tripping. Talk about dominating this race at the moment. 6.7 seconds is a gap between himself and Les Carmichael. That is absolutely insane. The driver of that 444 car, it looks like he's got the waves on that car already, so I think he's willing to ride this race out for as long as he can, holding on to a fantastic lead at the current moment, and we'll look to try and hold on to it between now and the very end. Still 51 minutes left to go in round number 5 of the PCA Challenge Class Series here at Aragon. The rain is coming down, and these competitors are going to be on their tippy toes. I can't even say walking around on eggshells. I think walking around a minefield is probably the best way that we can describe it. Those bits of standing water, always treacherous. We saw it last week in the PCA. May see it again here tonight as Jeffrey Block pulls out of the spray, pulls out of the drift, trying to apply some pressure to Hillman as he has to take a very shallow approach, heading down into turn number 13. So thankfully he keeps it going in a straight line, keeps it on the road, but very easy to lock up a wheel and run off the track heading through there. I mentioned it in turn 1. I'll mention it about all the turns around this racetrack. Yeah, the heck of a lot of runoff area. This track is one that has, I believe it's, can't really think of the best term at the moment, as I will hold off on that point of side-by-side racing. Gonna go on with Jeffrey Block and Andrew Hillman. That's gonna be the battle for P7, but Block carried a bit too much speed down into 1, so Hillman gonna be able to hold on to that 7th place position. Currently has a black flag for Les Carmichael from P2 in this race. That is a big development and a heartbreaking one for the driver of the 912 car. Gotta worry about those incident points here at this racetrack, but unfortunately for Les Carmichael, that's already come down early. That's such a shame. Not sure if that is down to incidents or whether or not that's a decision from race control. I will wait for further confirmation on that here in the not too far off future. But to wrap up on the point that I was raising, talking about this track, I believe it's a grade 1M, if my memory serves me correctly, for it's FIM certification, grade 1 FIM certification for motorcycles to race around here. Part of the MotoGP calendar, if my memory serves me correctly, it is a staple of motorcycle racing. That turn that you see is actually named after Marc Marquez. So you got a lot of runoff area, but having a lot of runoff area around a racetrack is basically like having a spare parachute whenever you go skydiving. It's in an ideal world, you won't have to use it. So these competitors will have to keep an eye on that. As hearing from Hugo doing an absolutely amazing job working on the cameras and the graphics and the virtual production hauler, and we'll have double duty here tonight as well after the broadcast of the Indy Next qualifier series a little bit earlier on this evening on Race Spot. Getting word from him that was a call from race control, that was a black flag being thrown Les Carmichael's way, and it was an incident with himself in the 59, so that was a contact as they had their way off through one of the final turns that caused him to get that black flag. So that was not for incident points. I will amend my previous statement as he comes down pit lane to serve that black flag. Meanwhile, a driver trying to get his bearing straight is Andrew Hillman, who went off the track, heading down into turn number 13 and 14. He's got to look to try and get a move done. It's side-by-side racing with himself and James Legault into one. Will he be able to jump into this spot, jump his way back up into seventh, or will Legault try and give him a bit of a headache? Let's see, as it looks like Hillman will be able to clear him as they head their way through the small little flat-out blast between turns number 2 and 3. Legault now has to keep his eyes in his rearview mirror. John Kaplan and Ben Whitehurst, along with Leon Snyman, going to try and apply some pressure here as well. And as we are about 47.5 minutes away from the end, we'll take a look at a replay to see what caused the black flag to go the way of Les Carmichael, drifting off into the side of the number 59 of Thomas Doherty. That was as they headed their way out of the very slow 8 and 9 section, probably the slowest parts of at least this configuration of the racetrack. Unfortunate to make that contact, but very easy to do so. Doherty got sent into a half spin. He's still running in second as that penalty has really affected the way that Les Carmichael's race was rolling. Slide down at P13, and we'll have to come down pit lane again unless he decide to break the rules and also come in for a pit stop during all that. I believe it was a drive-through that he picked up in the midst of that, so the black flag could not be served if he came into the pits at the exact same time. So we'll have to keep an eye on him having to come down pit lane between now and the very end, as Andrew Hillman briefly had James Legault on the outside of him as they headed their way down the back straightaway into 13 and 14, but they single file out once again as they get their way off into the braking zone. Legault holding on to 8th. John Kaplan currently slotted at 9th. Ben Whitehurst ran to add your top 10 at the present moment. I will also say breaking the 4th wall here, which is something I do like to do from time to time on these solo shows. I think getting one glass of water for myself before this show started may have been a terrible mistake. So if my voice gives out by the end of the show, I can rest easy knowing that I gave it my very best. Speaking of giving it your very best, John Kaplan gave it his very best with a move hang down to turn number 1, and it was successful as he's now jumped his way up in a P8 over James Legault, who showed some speed earlier on in that 027 machine. I think things have started to fall off for him. He once got a move put on him by Jeffrey Block, who's jumped his way up into 6th, and now he's really trying to just cling on to a spot inside the top 10, as you have to look at the battling going on right in front. The two drivers running in P7 and 8 of Andrew Hillman and John Kaplan going to be having a party for this battle as they get so close to contacting their way off into 7, down to another heavy braking zone of turn number 8. You can see down to first gear through this section as well. The only part of this racetrack, or even in the dry, where these competitors would have to do that. And one part of this racetrack that I personally have never really been able to get a full grip on, but very good reason why I'm behind the microphone instead behind the wheel. If I was sat there on the racetrack for 15 minutes, I probably would have hit the wall here in the commentary booth. Meanwhile, I can hold on a solo show and my voice will not give out unless I have to scream at the top of my lungs for an hour straight. But these racers not giving me a single point to catch my breath as Anthony DiVincenzo and Thomas Doherty got duking out side by side into turn number 13 and 14, and holding on to that P2 spot will be Thomas Doherty, but Anthony DiVincenzo certainly gave it the old college try as he headed his way down into that final bend. Trippett gonna still use that opportunity to just drive off into the sunset more and more. 7 seconds is the gap as it continues to fluctuate. I will also say, just looking at the camera feed that we've got right now, you know that torrential rain that we had not too long ago, folks? I think it's just about disappeared. I think the rain has just about vanished. I mean, it is still not dry out there on the racetrack. It's I think the best way I can describe it is if you shut off the hose that's feeding water into an Olympic-sized swimming pool, you're not going to say, oh, look, the pool is completely bone dry as soon as that hose shuts off. No, this track is still soaked, but considering that the rain has stopped about 44 minutes away from the end of this race, in fact, it's probably stopped a little bit earlier on than that, so we may very well find ourselves in a situation where come time for the pit stop in the final 12.5 minutes, these competitors may have to think about a potential tire swap, maybe going on to dries, maybe deciding to get off of those wet tires. We'll just have to find out as James Legault, he's had a point of moment out there on the racetrack that I believe, unless I'm mistaken, is on the outskirts of turn number 5. The heavy braking zone in the mid-sector can be tricky as you have a bend in the road leading up to it, but unfortunately for him, he has stopped out there and doesn't look to get back up and rolling. I wonder if that is potentially a hardware failure for him as well. In the meantime, as we take a look at this replay to see what exactly happened to James Legault, Ed Trippett still continues to eke at now an 8-second gap up in the front of the field. And yeah, just clip the paint. Oh, yeah, that is a massive hardware failure for him. I think in the midst of trying to get that car snapped back around the right direction, he ended up potentially unplugging his steering wheel. I've done that before, as contact made, was just going to race it. Thomas Doherty ran wide heading into the final turn and was trying to get his bearings straight as he lost out on 2 spots, but he's going to lose out on a lot more. Certainly Anthony DiVincenzo going to be furious with that moment. Contact being made as it was Thomas Doherty trying to rejoin the racetrack. DiVincenzo now slided down at P6 and will potentially lose out on another spot as Andrew Hillman down the inside of him, gonna have a lockup, and he's gonna lose out 2 spots in 1 shot. The driver of the 420 car was going so well in this race, briefly jumped up into a podium spot, but things go south very quickly in the rain. Unfortunately for him, it has gone south, and really nothing that he could do in either situation. Very unfortunate for Thomas Doherty, and just a wrap up on that moment from James Legault. I have done that myself. If you ever see the sim rig setup that I personally have, it is a ragtag, ramshackle affair. So it can happen. If you snap the wheel a bit too much, it'll just unplug everything. It's actually 2 drivers running wide. So DiVincenzo ran wide, kind of going off the track in sympathy to Thomas Doherty, trying to cut down to the inside, heading off through turn number 14 onto that start finish straightaway, and just misjudged it. Contact made. Would not be shocked if Thomas Doherty picks himself up a penalty as a result of that contact. We'll have to see what race control can do, but we are most certainly expecting race control to at least review that incident and give their 2 cents in the not too far off future. DiVincenzo has been able to get 1 spot done though, and Andrew Hillman has slipped back in tow, so DiVincenzo now slotted in 7th as seeing the black flag down the air for Thomas Doherty, and I'm sure that is for the contact being made with himself and Anthony DiVincenzo. Quick work from race control, somebody who has done race control work himself. It's a thankless job. I can't even say it's like being the drummer of a band where one mistake and everybody's going to call you out. It's basically being like the producer for a song. It's one of those sort of deals where if the producer does something bad, everyone's got to point their finger at it and say, hey, look at this guy. He did something bad. He made 1 mistake. Race control always does fantastic work, as does our producer, Mr. Hugo Luis. Did a fantastic job working on the cameras and the graphics in the virtual production hauler, and also having his ear be bled by me talking on a non-stop basis for an hour and a half. Side-by-side racing with Anthony DiVincenzo and Andrew Hillman, still going to be intense through turn number 1 as Hillman holds on to the inside line as they head their way through turn number 2. They're going to single file out very briefly, and they will fully be single file as they head their way into 3. Thomas Doherty has also come down pit lane, the number 59 car, to once again serve that penalty that he picked up a few moments ago. Unfortunate turn of events for him. First had that moment with himself and Les Carmichael, and now he has his own moment in time out there on the racetrack. Unfortunate break for him, but he has a lot of time left to go here in this race before he can fully throw in the towel and say that he just needs to look ahead to the next round of the championship. But as we are past the first 20 minutes of this race into the second third, I want to once again thank Princess Cruises for being the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 14, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 17 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. We'd like to once again thank Princess Cruises for sponsoring this series and sponsoring this amazing racing that we are seeing. You know, in tricky conditions like this, it can be very easy to make a small little mistake. You just dip a wheel off into a pothole and you're going to skid off the racetrack. Again, I ran in karts in the rain for long enough. Those karts very susceptible to aquaplaning, considering you're running about a half an inch up off the ground. First time I ever ran in the rain was at the SCCA Solo Nationals in 2016, which is most certainly a trial by fire. I always love racing in the rain, but there is no getting around the fact that running in the rain is incredibly challenging. So even though we have had an occasional tussle out there on the racetrack with drivers making contact, I want to commend all the racers in the PCA world for putting on some absolutely fantastic racing over the past 2 weeks here as all of the series have made their appearance here at Aragon, with some pretty heavy rain affecting all of the races throughout this as well. Going into split view, you can see Andrew Hillman once again battling with Leon Snyman. That's a battle for 7th at the current moment, as we also have on the bottom end of your screen, that's Lisa Eskridge leading a small little train of cars with herself, Dave Jones and Ken Eskridge slotted back in tow. Gonna see what sort of battling we can have between these competitors between now and the very end as we get closer and closer to the halfway mark. And continuing on the discussion about track evolution, I wonder if we can once again pop up the track conditions graphic so all you folks tuning into this broadcast can see that it is still topsy-turvy. The track temperature has not really gone up, 21 degrees Celsius at the moment. That is not very hot, especially for racing circuits. However, as we've gone from mostly cloudy to pouring rain to partly cloudy, we are probably going to see that dip up a little bit between now and the very end. Also want to raise the fact that this track may dry out rather quickly, considering those 24 to 25 kilometer an hour winds. That may very well, it'll pretty much be putting this track in a giant commercial grade meat dehydrator between now and the end. Very odd saying, but I think you all get what I'm getting at there. This is going to be a very interesting decision whether or not these racers decide to say, you know what, I'm going to come in for dry tires between now and the very end, gamble for a driver who's maybe running a little bit farther behind, looking to bounce back. It could very well work. Say, for instance, Les Carmichael just jumped his way up into a top 10 spot with a move on Alex Lidback, came in to serve that penalty a little bit earlier on, is most certainly on the back foot. As we jump back to this battle involving Lisa and Ken Eskridge, along with Dave Jones, nearly 3 wide as they had their way into the final turn. As the driver pulled off the racetrack, heading down the back straightaway. Not entirely sure who that was, just stopped on the side of the road. But either way, that is not a spot you want to be in. I can say this with the utmost confidence. Hey, you can't park there. James Legault has rejoined the racetrack, but did go off it once again with a pretty severe lockup heading down into turn number 8. Oh, as that's Vernon Messer. He was a driver off the circuit, hit the painted sides of this track, hit it, slid around, he hits the fence and pulls off to the racetrack as quickly as he possibly can to avoid having any sort of disaster break out for him. Now, it was last week here on Race Spot with the club class broadcast where we saw some racers hit the painted green stuff, the faux astroturf, I think is the correct technical term, just fake grass. They decided to paint it green because it looks a little bit like grass and it looks better than just regular old gray asphalt. That and the painted white lines, if you hit paint in the rain, it goes without saying that it's not going to grip up like asphalt. So it'll pretty much be like these racers land themselves on a giant slip and slide. So not a good position to be in if you hit any part of the paint around this racetrack, especially at terminal velocity heading down that back straightaway. So keep an eye on that to maybe catch some of these racers out as they go throughout this event here. 35 minutes into this race now. Look at a dive from David Sawtry as he heads his way into turn number 13 and 14. What a send from the driver of the 511 car, Adam Holland. I'm sure was not expecting that in the 144, but he should have seen it coming. He left a lane open on the inside, and Sawtry said, you know what? He probably took the Aaron Senna quote to heart. He took a quote that I got from a middle school counselor that said you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And ever since then, David Sawtry used that opportunity to jump his way up in a P12. What a dive, what a move from David Sawtry. That right there is full commitment. We've seen so many racers lock up a wheel, just run wide, heading into that section of the racetrack, but no, he goes from hero to zero. He loses it coming out of turn number 3, impacts the wall. That front bumper now askew. He slips down to 14th, right as we were talking about going for the move of a lifetime. The mistake ripping out his heart there. That is such a shame. That right there is a commentator's jinx to David Sawtry. I do deeply apologize for what may have been the most heart-crushing commentator's jinx I've applied in quite some time. And when I say quite some time, I mean probably about 3 days. Oh, he hit in the worst part of the wall, too. Right as the tire barrier started, that is a sledgehammer shot into the wall. So David Sawtry going to be, I wouldn't say out of it. We still have about half of this race left to go, a little bit more than that, for that matter. But that is some huge damage on that car. We'll have to come in to repair it. These drivers drivers do have faster pairs allotted to them, so that is not necessarily game, set, match, but it is very much close to it, as his strategy will probably be thrown completely asunder as we get a little bit farther along here in this race. Les Carmichael, in the meantime, has been able to get a move done on Ben Whitehurst, but Whitehurst wants to get the move done back on Carmichael. This battle for ninth, really these racers running in a pack all of their lonesome, as you have to go about 3 seconds farther up the road to find Andrew Hillman, and have to go about 2 seconds back to find Alex Lidback. Actually, I say 2 seconds, it's closer to about a second and a half, as now it was Whitehurst losing out a boatload of time, heading his way off through the final turn. Very fitting that I mentioned boatload, considering that these cars basically do have to be boats with the amount of rain out there on the track, but the spray is getting minimal, and I have a feeling that we very well may have, I wouldn't necessarily say a fully dry track, but a heck of a lot drier than we have had throughout this race up to this point. So who knows, maybe by the very end, that little pipe dream that we mentioned during the club class broadcast when it was myself, Ron Mullins, and Joe Peak with you on the show for that. We talked about the dry tires maybe being a viable strategy call for these racers then, and may very well be a call for these racers here tonight. So we'll have to keep an eye as we get a little bit farther along, closer and closer to the halfway mark, only 2 minutes and about 13 seconds away from that, as we run on board with Andrew Hillman running right in the toe of Leon Steinman. So you can hear the big lift from him heading his way off through turn number 10. The thing about the back flat-out blast of this racetrack is it is straight for a while, but you have got to build up most of your speed heading off through the turns, and if you can do that well, you can be golden doubly so in the rain, as Andrew Hillman going to get the run and maybe get P7 side by side with himself and Leon Steinman heading his way into turn number 13. Steinman going to fight back on the inside line, hits the curb, nearly runs into the side of the 6 car of Andrew Hillman. They kept it going in a straight line, well held from Leon Steinman behind the wheel of that 993 machine. That could have ended in an absolute catastrophe if anybody else got involved in that. They kept it smooth, they kept it clean, they battled hard, and they were still going out there on the racetrack, which is the most important thing of all. John Kaplan and Anthony DiVincenzo, meanwhile, have their own battle. This for 5th at the current moment between these two competitors, so gonna see who can win out in this fight, as DiVincenzo looking to fight back after that contact was made a little bit earlier on with himself and the 59 of Thomas Doherty. He's running 6th at the current moment. Maybe a little bit of damage on that race car, but right now the only thing that he is focused on is getting back up towards the front, making some more moves. I talked about it a little bit earlier on in the show. He has shown some speed behind the wheel of that 420 car all season long, so keep an eye on him to maybe impress between now and the end of the season, the final 2 rounds to look forward to at Zolder and VIR. And of course, you'll be able to catch all of the action here on RaceSpot TV, as that's Lisa Eskridge around heading out of turn number 1. She spins into the pit lane exit. Gonna have to talk about that in the not too far off future, but Eskridge gonna get that car spun back around in the right direction. Unfortunate moment for her, as she was still in that battle at the time with Ken Eskridge, and I believe that was Vernon Messer right behind, involved in all of that. Unfortunately, spinning out of that spot, gets it back around in the right direction, but a slide in P18 at the current moment, as we switch our attention away from that and switch it to this battle with Robert Gallus and John Kaplan. Kaplan in the toe and in the spray of Gallus, but not close enough to get a move done. But these racers may have another piece to the puzzle, as they're slowly but surely reeling in your current P3 runner of Jeffrey Block. Robert Gallus currently a second behind that racer, so gonna have to keep our eyes on this battle, see whether or not this 1 and 3 is going to turn into a full 4-car battle in the not too far future. I mean, if I were a betting man, I probably would be homeless, but if I had to place Monopoly money on all of that, I would probably say that that battle is going to turn into a 4-car fight here in the not too far off future. Meanwhile, we jump to Thomas Doherty. He's trying to get a 2-for-1 deal done, heading down to turn number 1. At least he took one bite of it. Adam Holland was slotted down in P13 now as a result of that move from Doherty. He's not going to have to worry about Alex Lidback, as that's a driver exiting the pits right in front of them. So this battle with Doherty is still going to be intense in the run-up to the end, as John Kaplan and Robert Gale is going to battle. Gale is slow as he heads his way through 7. Going to lose out on that P4 spot to Kaplan. Maybe he'll lose out on some even more time as well. Not sure what the deal was for him. May have been a spin or some sort of running wide moment into 7 and 8. I talked about some of the curved braking zones, notably turn number 5, but turn number 7 and the braking zone leading up to it has even more of a pronounced curve and also has a lot of standing water in there too. So I think that may have been what caught out Robert Gale as he lost out on a whole lot of time. But let's take a look at it here as we follow Anthony DiVincenzo. Contact made, and that's going to send Gallus into a half spin. I think it may have been close to a third of the spin, but no matter how you slice the contact made, so there very well may be a penalty heading the way of Anthony DiVincenzo for that contact, carrying a boatload of speed into turn 7 and going to lose out on that as Thomas Doherty, he's off the circuit in the 59 machine. I believe that was on the outside of turn number 9, unless I am mistaken. So not sure what the deal is there. Maybe another hardware failure. Saw that a little bit earlier on here in this race, so maybe a case of deja vu as we're now 27 and a half minutes away from the fall of the checkered flag in round number 5 of the PCA Sim Racing Series here for the Challenge class. If you are enjoying the action, happy to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so don't miss out on any of it, as that right there was the first moment from Doherty. Ran wide, lost it, heading into turn number 7, goes for a quick trip into the gravel trap, and just looks like just pull over to the side of the road potentially here, decide to call it a day. Already had that penalty a little bit earlier on. Maybe some sort of hardware failure involving his monitor or VR headset, whatever it may be from Doherty, that could very well have forced him to pull over to the side of the road, and that could very well be what actually caused him to leave the racetrack in the first place. So we'll have to keep our eyes to see whether or not he rejoins the racetrack. Unfortunate way for his race to go, as he was running in a very good spot. As high as second a little bit earlier on here as we look at Anthony DiVincenzo trying to get the move done on Robert Gale. Those two came to blows. They swapped spots, so DiVincenzo now slotted in P5, but I would still expect a potential penalty to go the way of the 420 car. See, I'm a little bit... if there's anybody that I'm a little bit worried about, it's Robert Gale. It's just based off what we've seen thus far in this race. Was Les Carmichael having contact with the 59 of Thomas Doherty? The 912 of Les Carmichael picked up the penalty, and then the 59 had contact with the 420 car, and then the 59 got a penalty. Now the 420 has made contact with the 809 of Robert Gale, and we'll have to see whether or not the 420 of Anthony DiVincenzo will pick up a penalty as a result. I wonder if it's sort of like the cheese touch going on here of one driver picking up a penalty after crashing into another. Not too sure what the deal is, and you can definitely tell I'm a bit on the younger end since I brought out the Diary of a Whippy Kid reference. That's a Gen Z commentary moment here only on RaceSpot TV. Anthony Hillman, Andrew Hillman, my apologies, and Leon Snyman got to duke it out for P7. These competitors have been close to each other for quite some time, but they are going to have company soon as Les Carmichael and Ben Whitehurst are really in these racers. Carmichael at the very least is Whitehurst well farther behind. I believe that's actually a lapped car that's right around Carmichael at the current moment. Was shifting at my perspective on that somewhat. I believe that's Chris Schuessler slotted in 20th in the number 61 car that's running right around that racer, as it may turn into a 3-car battle here soon, side by side with Lidbeck and Holland as they head their way into turn number 5 and no, I got that wrong. I usually at 5 and 4. It's 4 and 5. We're not running this racetrack backwards, although that would be very intriguing. Holland with a bit of wiggle heading out of 5, gonna have to try and get the power down and hope to get this spot back to jump his way back up into the top 10. Goes for the dive into 7, close to contact, and they are running by themselves for now. Emphasis on for now, so you got some lap traffic. Maybe gonna apply some pressure to these racers too, but Holland holds on to P11 as Whitehurst completes your top 10. Now 24 minutes away from the end of this race. Ed Trippett holds on to a 12.5-second gap over Johan 9 with Jeffrey Block completing her podium. A little bit spread out throughout this field with the top 14 covered by nearly a full minute. We're expecting some challenges here on this racetrack with these challenging conditions. We've most certainly got it. As speaking of some battling and some tough stuff here, that's Patrick Augrey trying to get a move done. I believe that was side-by-side racing with himself and a driver on a different lap there. I believe that was Legault, if my memory serves me correctly. So that was not a swaparoo of spots, but that was a swaparoo for track position, as the 13 was able to jump in front of the 11, and now has an unobstructed view of the 144 car of Adam Holland right behind these drivers. Currently about 41 seconds back of your race leader of Ed Trippett, as he is still trying to pull the gap. It is a power move to say, you know what, I'm leading this race by a lot. Let's try and extend that gap even more. Side-by-side racing going to go on a little bit further behind it. Jack Stevenson battling with Lisa Eskridge. That's the battle for 17th at the current moment. And Stevenson, the Chicago region driver, not going to be able to get that spot as a black flag in the air for Anthony DiVincenzo. I can imagine this was for the contact between himself and Robert Gales, and that cheese touch sort of theory that I brought up earlier on may be fully at foot here, as DiVincenzo going to have to come in to serve that black flag. If there's any time to pick up a black flag, if there is a good time to, if there is a good time to pick up a black flag, I would say this is probably it, as you have a good idea as to how things are going to go between now and the very end, and it may be a bit easier to kind of shift your agenda as we get closer and closer to the final 20 minutes of this race here tonight. DiVincenzo running in no man's land will probably come in to serve that penalty, as we are now about 10 minutes away as well from the start of the pit cycle. And with that, I do have to bring up this discussion once again, kind of talking about the opportunity that these racers may have to throw caution to the wind strategically and try and run on dry tires. We saw that briefly as we rode on board with Anthony DiVincenzo heading his way down the start-finish straightaway, and you can see it from this outboard shot following Les Carmichael as well. There is a noticeable dry line heading down that start-finish straightaway. As much as this track was soaked with rain at one point, we had the rain really coming down hard. We've got a lot of cars out there on the racetrack. More than 20 competitors, 25 drivers took the start in this race. As much as some have dropped out, a vast majority of them are still there on the circuit. Couple that with the sun blaring down on this racetrack, that Iberian sun slowly but surely evaporating that rain, and rather high winds as well has certainly played a factor in all this side-by-side racing going on with Jack Stevenson and Lisa Eskridge as they duke it out, heading their way down into the final corner, and it looks like that will be Jack Stevenson holding on to that spot, at least for now. 21 minutes left to go on the clock. And before we once again talk about PCA's title sponsor here in 2025, that being Princess Cruises, I want to thank another person that has just helped me out on this show outside of our producer Hugo Luis doing a fantastic job, is my father, who just brought up a second glass of water for me here in the broadcast booth. So thank you, Dad. That was a greatly appreciated offering there. That was most certainly needed, as I had about a sip and a half left in the glass of water that I brought up here at the very start. We got enough water out there on the racetrack. They had to steal a little bit of it from the broadcast booth, to pour a little bit of it, hang down to turn number 6. It was John Kaplan with a slide as he heads his way into turn number 13 and 14. Was able to keep it going in a straight line, holds on to third for now, but Jeffrey Block going to try and apply that pressure as we get farther along and closer to the end. Anthony DiVincenzo makes that call to come down pit lane to serve that black flag. But now, as we approach the final 20 minutes of this race, once again, we would like to thank Princess Cruises for being the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 14, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 17 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure by calling 833-679-2188. We'd like to thank Princess Cruises for making these broadcasts possible, making this action possible, because even though Ed Trippett is driving off into the sunset, frankly, he can come into the pits and probably have a chicken sandwich, Days of Thunder style. He can still exit out from the pit lane with the race lead. He has been dominant up to this point in the race, and for a driver who grabbed his first pole position earlier on, he's going to look to try and do what Todd Goldberg did in the last round of the championship at Laguna Seca, who became the first racer here in this PCA Challenge class here in Series 14 to convert a pole into a win. Trippett on track to do that right now as he holds on to the race lead by 17.7 seconds just in this little jib-jab of mine. That gap continues to fluctuate. It's rain. Everybody's going to be running different lines. The time is going to go, then wash away, then go, then wash away. It's like the tides of the ocean. You can explore them by getting in contact with Princess Cruises. That right there was a sponsor plug about as slick as 80 grit sandpaper, but this racetrack is getting less slick. It's getting a bit grippier. That dry line is starting to form, and I'm wondering if there are any racers that are deciding to run on dries, as that was contact into the wall for Keith Markison in the 079 car, the Sierra Nevada racer. He may be living in a dry part of the country, but he is not living here in a dry racetrack as he smacks the wall, heading his way onto the back straightaway. That car is going to be crabbing his way through turn number 11. That's a heartbreaking moment. He was running pretty strongly in this race, but it shows you how quickly things can change. Loses it, hits the wall, and there's his damage. Done immediately. Thankfully, though, of all the tracks, of all the parts of the racetrack to smack the wall, I think on the back end of the circuit is probably slightly preferable, as you have a somewhat shorter run down into pit lane, but even still, that's got to be a pretty big kick in the shins for him. Anthony DiVincenzo is now down in pit lane once again, came in to serve that penalty a little bit earlier on, and he is back down in pit lane now for his one and only scheduled stop. Up on the jacks he is going to go, so I think he's deciding to throw caution to the wind and maybe put some dry tires on this car. There's two factors deciding it all. Number one, actually, I will mention a third. Number one, you've got the track that is slowly but surely drying out there on the racetrack. Number two, if you're deciding to stay on wet tires, you lose out on a boatload of tire temperature trundling your way down pit lane. But number three, one thing that may be good in the camp of racers who decide to stay on wets is the pit exit. Not the pit entry. The pit entry, of course, you have to worry about that on wets because everybody started this race on wets, so you can't necessarily do it on dries if you haven't put dries on your car. That seems like a rip in the space-time continuum if you're able to start this race on wet and then come into the pits for the first time on dry tires. That something doesn't really add up there. That's glitch in the matrix, whatever it may be. But the pit exit on the slick tires gonna be tricky. There's such razor-thin margins as you head your way out of pit lane here at Aragon that you've really got to stay on your toes to make sure that you don't pick up any sort of pit lane infraction and can bring it home without picking up any more penalties. As now we've got a battle. That's Andrew Hillman going down for the dive on Robert Gales. He gets it done. Nope, he doesn't. He did get it done briefly. He was ahead the apex, which is what F1 would worry about, but now ran wide, went off the circuit. He now drops down to P6 in that number 6 car as Gales once again gets past as he ran off the circuit. Leon Steinman, meanwhile, has come back down pit lane. He has come into pit lane, I should say. My apologies. In the 993 car. He's now going to fall outside of the top 10 with this pit stop as we keep an eye on one of the racers that we just saw come down pit lane. Anthony DiVincenzo behind the wheel of the 420 car. This is going to be really fascinating to see what these racers are going to do between now and the end. Going to be a tense end for sure. That is the one way that we can describe it, with 15 and a half minutes left to go here in round number 5 of the PCA Challenge Series. You know, water may not be the best friend of these drivers out there on circuit, but it's certainly my best friend in this broadcast booth. So that is my appreciation here of the evening, and doubly so considering right as we were playing the intro video, in fact, before we got the broadcast up and rolling, kind of breaking the fourth wall as we see the pit stop still going on here, with some drivers probably making the call to come down pit lane. Most likely in the next 5 minutes, we'll see everybody else make that decision at last. But to break the fourth wall and kind of give my little behind-the-scenes perspective before we got this broadcast live. Right before my mic went live, as we were playing the wonderful PCA intro video, I had to run and close the window in my room just because there are some sirens blaring. So I was like, you know what? I don't want that coming across a microphone. My microphone doesn't pick up a lot. It picks up my voice quite well. Check 1, 2. But it usually doesn't pick up a whole lot of background noise, but I figured I'd play it safe. So I'm definitely running a little bit hot here in the broadcast booth. Certainly not as hot as some of these racers' tires may be if they really have to worry about overheating. We get to the point with a drying track where these competitors do have to worry about those tires just melting into black puddles just being left around the racetrack. I have had the opportunity to do both of the extremes. I have driven a kart on rain tires in the dry, and I've driven a kart on dry tires in the rain. And maybe I'm just a very sick man, which based off the fact that I've been running my mouth for about an hour straight now, I am most certainly sick in the head. But I always preferred running dry tires in the rain instead of running rain tires in the dry. Because as much as those rain tires, a whole lot of grip. They're actually a little bit stickier than the dry tires themselves. They're sticky. You can get a lot of grip out of them. The thing is, though, you get to the point where you have to worry about the tires developing too much grip and burning themselves up. You get to the point sooner rather than later where the tires are screaming pain, and you're gonna soon be screaming in pain yourself when you go off the track after trying to turn. The back end won't want to cooperate, the front end won't want to cooperate, and you pretty much just slide off the racetrack as if you're a couch on coasters sliding down a carpeted flight of stairs. That does not seem like a very fun ride, at least to me, albeit I was not, I don't know, maybe if you ask Steve-O, he'd probably be a fan of that, but me personally, I like to live my life in the cruising lane, so that's a personal preference. Robert Gallus has come down pit lane in the 809 machine. He comes in from 5th, so we will see what his strategy call is going to be. Chris Drankovitz will join him down in pit lane as well. Waiting for the likes of Ed Trippett, Johan Nye, Andrew Hillman, and others to make that call to come down pit lane. Les Carmichael, meanwhile, he's been able to shuffle his way up into 4th. We saw him come into the pits a little bit earlier on. However, that was for a penalty. That was not a strategy call. I don't believe he has come in for a full pit stop yet. Emphasis on yet. He will have to do that between now and the end if he hasn't already done that. But even with that black flag that he had, it's been a pretty rousing recovery drive for the driver of the 912. Able to get that black flag taken care of early, showed some great pace in the early stages. I mean, hey, you can't run in the podium if you don't have a lot of speed. So, hey, props where props are most certainly due to Les Carmichael, as he is still going to try and tackle the end of this race as best and efficiently as he can. Getting some word as well from our wonderful producer, Mr. Hugo Luis, in the production truck, as you can see from that graphic with that trip now coming down in pit lane. Some drivers have decided to take dries. Anthony DiVincenzo, we saw him up on the jacks. He's gone onto dry tires. Robert Gallus has come onto dry tires. Dave Jones and Jack Stevenson have done it as well, along with Chris Drankovitz. I believe there have been some more between the spots of P14 down to P20, but no matter how you slice it, we do have some racers who have made that call. Actually, I'm going to amend my previous statement. Not everybody has fully decided to change compounds. Those were everybody that I raised there. So I was thinking there may have been more. A little bit surprised that there haven't been more. In fact, but we may have some more soon. I believe Ed Trippett has decided to stay out there on the wet. It's pretty much a comfort decision. Do you want to go for all-out glory and try and risk it for the biscuit or the Triscuit if you are feeling the low-calorie option? We don't judge here. Everybody has their own dietary preferences. But whether you want to risk it and try and go for the win, get that W, or whether you just want to take it easy, focus on the points, and just try and have a good day. Ed Trippett on track for his second win here this season, and a comfortable win at that. He did have to risk it, frankly. Even if the dry tires are supremely better than the wets, he can afford to lose probably about 1.3 seconds between now and the very end, and he'll still be able to hold on to that spot. So it is, Ed Trippett didn't really have any means to try and risk it. Anthony DiVincenzo, meanwhile, had that black flag. he decided to go for it, and I gotta say, I respect that call. I appreciate that call. As Les Carmichael, he came into the pits. Has he come in for slick tires? Unfortunately, my live timing is non-existent for me. I have one monitor that I commentate these on, so it's pretty much just a balancing act trying to juggle so many different things at once on my screen, which is even more fun when I try and do production work, which don't ask me how I do that. If you want to ask me how I do that, ask a circus clan how he can juggle chainsaws that are actively running. Johan Nye has come down pit lane in the 141 machine, so he will give the race lead back to Ed Trippett. Rather surprised, and not necessarily surprising, but shocking, for lack of a better term, that Ed Trippett was able to come into pit lane and drop down only to second. That is absurd. Andrew Hillman, meanwhile, picks up a black flag, and unless that was supremely odd timing from race control, I believe that is a pit lane infraction, so that's going to take him out of contention. He has had a wild race in that number 6 car, so sadly for him, things will go down to naught as he'll have to be in pit lane for quite some time. Up on the Jack's gonna put some dry tires, but he could put a rocket engine in that race car and he would still run into some trouble to try and make it to the very end and stay up there at the front. So I think that may have been it. Pit lane speeding. This pit entry is rather odd in the sense that you have so many different lanes, and that pit lane speed limit line does come out of nowhere. In my first few times running around this racetrack, in fact, I was caught out by that myself. But it hasn't been the first time that we had some odd sort of limitations in terms of when the pit lane speed limit starts. You got the line there. There's where it actually starts, and then there's the start-finish line. You can see him gas up the throttle a little bit. I think and all that just got bopped for speeding. That's going to take him out of contention. That's a real shame. Was putting on a pretty compelling race. I mean, just selfish things to say from my perspective here in the commentary booth. He had a race. I mean, we were talking about him all throughout this. Unfortunately, we probably won't talk about him between now and the very end, considering he has picked up that penalty and has dropped down through the running order like an anvil pushed out of a helicopter. I was going to make a joke saying that the water that I have here in the commentary booth is actually condensation from the racetrack, but that sounds a little bit yucky. This is pretty tasty, though. We got a battle going on with Les Carmichael and Anthony DiVincenzo. This is a battle for 7th. DiVincenzo going to hold on to the inside line as they head their way onto the back straightaway, heading through turn number 12. And it looks like Carmichael got slipped back in tow, trying to utilize that draft to maybe go for the dive, heading off into turn number 13 and 14. Not close enough as Adam Holland has come down pit lane right in front of them. Still waiting for some more racers to come into the pit, so we are not out of the woodwork just yet. However, we have a pretty good idea as to who's going to win this race, with Ed Trippett holding on to a 15.5-second gap up at the front. That is astonishing. That is truly a fantastic run from him. One last update, though, on the track conditions. If we can pop up that wonderful graphic that we have here on RaceSpot for that, thank you very much. Look at the evolution of track attempts. It started off at, I believe it was around 23C, if my memory serves me correctly, which it's my memory. I can't even remember what I had for dinner tonight, which is saying something because I just got done doing the washing up right before I went to do this broadcast. We started off at about 23C, ran to 21C. It's now 28 degrees Celsius for the track temperature. So that's a big swing. These racers have been on their toes throughout. As something's going on with Les Carmichael, he's going off the circuit. That is coming out of turn number 5. Maybe a half spin, maybe contact. We'll take a look at the replay. Just all by himself, loses it, hits the fence. That is a heartbreaking mistake from Carmichael in what has been a pretty topsy-turvy evening for him up to this point, and things going to continue in that direction as he's now going to have to worry about the challenging from Leon Snyman in that 993 machine. This is a battle for 7th between these racers, well farther back from his at 1 foe of Anthony DiVincenzo. I wonder if it is possible as well if we could pop up the tire compound graphic so we can see kind of the differential of everybody out there on the racetrack. Some racers yet to come down pit lanes, so that could certainly explain it. However, I think the reason why Les Carmichael is maybe starting to struggle out there I think we're at the point where the wet tires are feeling the burn. They're feeling the pain right now. I think it really is the best way to describe it. You look at the lap times from Anthony DiVincenzo, and you look at the times from Jeffrey Block running a little bit farther in front. Block yet to come down pit lane, but he is running on those wet tires, and you can see it just, I mean, that is, I can't even say that is a margin or a chunk getting taken out. That is a unit getting taken out. Lap after lap, that gap continues to careen down. So Anthony DiVincenzo doing everything that he needs to do in those dry tires. I think if I were out there on the racetrack, I would have gone for the dries, but I'm usually the first person that says, hey, the track is somewhat dry. There's a small little patch out there on the circuit that is not incredibly soaked. Let's put some dry tires on there. That's gonna be a heck of a lot of fun. But I think that's a good call. DiVincenzo is really lapping quickly. He's reeling in Jeffrey Block. He's probably going to reel in Ken Eskridge between now and the end if he can play his cards right. By the way, sliced it. DiVincenzo with that call to go onto those dry tires has worked out fantastically for him. Meanwhile, that's Snyman and Galis. They're involved in the battle themselves, unless Carmichael as Galis going to be off into the painted stuff, heading his way down to turn number 8 and 9. Not going to get that spot from Carmichael, but does get it done on Snyman. That 3.5 minutes left on the clock here for round number 5 of the PCA Challenge class here in Series 14 of the Porsche Club of America Sim Racing Series. And to all of you tuning into this broadcast, we hope you're enjoying the action. We hope you're enjoying this battle that we got on screen right now between Galis and Carmichael. This would have been tense in the rain. It's still tense in the dry, but that right there is Galis blowing the doors off Les Carmichael as they head their way down into turn number 13 and 14. Oh, as I wasn't expecting that at all. Leon Snyman going to fight back with Carmichael, trying to get a little bit of overlap as they head their way into the final corner, as we have some 3-wide action nearly. Hoping Alex Lidback, he's going to jump out of that, say, you know what, I'm good. I don't want any part of this. Hillman goes for the dive on Jones. That's not going to work. Goes off the track in wild fashion as he threads the needle with a sideways, slideways moment from David Santry. And that right there, trying to get involved in all of that as well, was the 11 in the midst of all that, as they're still going to duke it out. Contact being made, heading down to turn number 1, and going to go straight on nearly is Santry. Alex Lidback holding on to P16 for now. Keyword being for now, as this battling is really getting frenetic out there on circuit. Lisa Eskridge has come into the pits. 5.1 seconds stopped in the pit stall for her, so maybe a quick splash and dash to make it to the very end, as we only have a minute and 45 seconds left on the clock for this race. Ed Trippett, that gap has gone down considerably. It's 12.6 seconds, but a 12.6 second gap is rather comfortable, as we only have a minute and a half left to go on the clock. Trippett probably going to be seeing the white flag. Either just saw it this time by, or we'll be seeing it next time by. I believe it'll be next time by for Trippett, just based off numbers and positioning and all of that jazz. Ken Eskridge now coming into the pit lane himself, as we look at Dave Jones, the Pied Piper of this trio of cars, as Andrew Hillman and Ben Whitehurst going to battle for lucky number P13 right around each other. Hillman got that moved on a Whitehurst, as now going to try and risk it on Dave Jones, my apologies, side by side, as they head their way down into turn number 13 and 14. Who's going to get this move done? You can give it to Hillman. Hillman's been a wild racer to follow up to this point. He's had some off-track moments for sure. It's very challenging, the conditions here at Aragon, but he has been able to keep it on the road more often than not. It's also given us a lot of action to keep our eyes focused on. I know from my perspective as a commentator, I always love to see it. I feel like even though I have done a lot less production work than you've probably done in the past month, Hugo, I know from my perspective, doing the light production work that I have, that that is also cool to see a driver that is always going to bring the attention, bring the thunder, and bring the excitement here at Aragon. That's Adam Holland going for a move on Vernon Messer side by side between those competitors. If you remember a little bit earlier on in this race, Messer had a moment heading his way down the back straightaway, impacted the wall, has gotten that damage repaired, is currently holding on to P11, trying to fight to try and jump his way up into the top 10, which would be a very good spot to be in, considering the drama he found himself in earlier. Holland, meanwhile, trying to get a spot on Leon Snyman and through into P9 he is going to go. Meanwhile, up in the front, Ed Trippett has begun the final lap of this race here at Aragon, heading his way into turn number 5 for the final time. 12 seconds is the gap between himself and Johan Nye, teetering around that and going a little bit farther down. It was 17 seconds at its peak, but that is still an absolutely insane margin. And in fact, in this entire broadcast, I've probably had a couple pauses a little bit longer than this, but I do want to kind of just put into perspective how big 12 seconds of a gap is. Oh, I can't even do it. I was going to just remain silent so you can really get a vision as to how long 12 seconds is at in a race like this. But Adam Holland not giving us a single point to even catch our breath as he is really duking it out in this battle with Steinman right behind, Les Carmichael run in front, and Vernon Messer going to try and apply some pressure to Leon Snyman to try and grab the win these races. About a minute behind your race leader of Ed Trippett these races. About 20 seconds back is Anthony DiVincenzo, who's been on a tour as of recent here in this race, able to make up a whole lot of moves on those dry tires, but he's in a dangerous spot, running off into the curb as he headed his way through turn number 12, but he will get that final podium spot right as the buzzer is going to ring at the front for Ed Trippett, who is put on a commanding drive here at Aragon, weaving his way on the start-finish straightaway, converts a pole to the win, the second driver in a row to do that here in the PCA Challenge class. He wins it tonight here at Aragon. Johan Nye going to come home in P2. Anthony DiVincenzo will finish in third as John Kaplan going to give it his all, but not be able to hold on to P3 at the very end. What a fight back. What a comeback from the driver of the 420 of Anthony DiVincenzo. Incredible stuff, and you can see him with the fist in the air. Well, as overall maybe a slightly frustrating evening after some drama early on, he fought back and put on a darn good drive to get a podium at the very end of it all. Meanwhile, Adam Holland and Leon Snyman continue to battle. This is a battle for ninth. Les Carmichael driving off into the sunset. You're at 1 point podium runner. Not going to walk away at the podium, but he will take some solace in the fact that he will finish this race inside of the top 10. Vernon Messer not able to get close enough to the two right in front of him, unless they come to blows, which they certainly got close to doing. Looks like Snyman going to hold on to the final spot inside the top 10 as Adam Holland going to finish right in front in P9. So a few more cars left across the line, but in an incredible night of racing action here for round number 5 of the PCA Challenge class at Aragon. Heavy rain and changeable track conditions kept us as the broadcasters and these drivers for sure on their toes from the drop of the green through to the checkered, and the battling isn't even over yet. Andy McCune currently battling right now. This is a battle heading down into the final turn with himself the number 61 car right around, I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken. That, yes, it is. It's Chris Schuessler in that number 61. Effort started this race up at the back of the pack after not setting a time in qualifying, if my memory serves me correctly. I'm going to put him in P23 in the battle between the final two to cross the line here in this race at Aragon. Going to touch on your results here right about now after 33 laps of racing action. Our shout outs as well go to Anthony DiVincenzo. Speaking about him being on the charge, set the fastest lap of the race at a 141.856 right on lap 30. Shows you how quick he was able to get those dry tires up to temp and able to send some heaters as we got to the end. But Ed Trippett is your winner at the end of it all. Put on a darn good drive to grab the W. Johan Nye is going to finish in second with Anthony DiVincenzo completing her podium in third. John Kaplan will finish in fourth in front of him, in front of Jeffrey Block, who's right behind him. Robert Gales is finishing this race in P6 in front of Ken Esker, who put on a very nice drive. We don't really talk about the driver of the 77 too much. Was able to break his way up in the top 10 right towards the end. So our shout outs go to him. Les Carmichael able to put on a rousing recovery after some drama early on. He finishes this race in 8th in front of Adam Holland in 9th, and Leon Steinman completing your top 10. Looking through the rest of the field, we got Vernon Messer class in P11, Andrew Hillman in 12th, Dave Jones in P13, Ben Whitehurst in 14th, Alex Lidback is classed in P15, David Sauntry in 16th, Keith Markison with a crash in the midsection of this race is classed in 17th, Lisa Eskridge in P18, Jack Stevenson in 19th, Patrick Augrey will finish this race in 20th. Only a few more drivers left to go through. James Legault had some hardware failure during this race. He's classed in 21st. The same, I believe, can be said about Thomas Doherty, who pulled over to the side of the road midway through and spent a decent amount of time there. He was able to rejoin the race and finishes in 22nd. Chris Schuessler, after starting this race at the back of the pack, is classed in 23rd. Andy McCune, the last of the drivers to see the checkered flag, as Chris Drankovitz ran into tricky bits throughout this race and is classed down in 25th. Let's have a chat, though, with your race winner at the end of tonight. Ed Trippett now joins us here in the broadcast booth. Ed, welcome in. Congratulations on the victory here at Aragon. How was it out there here tonight?
I had a blast. I really just had a blast. I really like this track. I like the rain. I was pretty committed and determined after last week's little, falling off the edge of, the corkscrew there. Not my favorite turn, so I'm glad we got this track. I really like this track. It's my favorite, I think, right now. And like I said, the wet weather is where I really shine. So glad to see the three guys up on the top are all Mark Schnell drivers. So go team Mark Schnell.
Yeah, good team drive in a very tough race. I want to ask you about the track conditions, because all throughout really kept you racers on your toes, from the heavy rain right after the start to the track nearly being bone dry at the very end. How tough was it just trying to stay on top of the track conditions?
I really practiced a lot for varying conditions. They gave us a heads up during a last week EDE that they might be looking even tire changes potentially. And Anthony, he changed tires. He almost caught up with those fresh tires. So, it was a gamble. He just didn't know when. But I did watch last night's race. I learned a lot from that. Watched every race this week and just try to do my best to handle any conditions that would come and just drive smooth. And when I drive slower, I tend to drive a little smoother. So it really worked out for me. I couldn't be happier. So hopefully I'm back in the hunt again.
Yeah, with your second win this season and your first trip into victory lane since Indianapolis for round number 3, I think you're going to carry a lot of momentum heading off into the next round of the championship at Zolder in 2 weeks' time. Bit of an oddity, that racetrack. So what are your thoughts heading there?
I don't remember the track that well. Each 2 weeks for me, I just focus so hard on the track that we have to work on. I'm just glad that this track was new for everyone. I think it gave me a little bit of an advantage for some reason. But next week, there's some fast drivers up there. I don't take any of this for granted. I just had a good week. And I know the teammates I work with team racing, they're all fast. So I can't take anything for granted. I got to work really hard. Want to call out to all my friends that are watching, Rick, if he's out there, and Blake and Danielle and little Harrison, and of course my buddy Josh out in California there. But anyway, thanks again for everything you guys do. I want to thank Doug and the team, and obviously our sponsors, Princess, who allows all this to happen. So thanks so much for everything.
And we absolutely love broadcasting these races. That was an awesome one here tonight. Looking forward to seeing you out there on the racetrack at Zolder next time out, Ed. Thank you for joining us here in the booth. Congratulations on the win, and we'll see you next time at Zolder. As that right there was Ed Trippett, your race winner here this evening. And let's also have a chat with our P2 finisher at the end of this race, Johan Nye, joining us now in the broadcast booth. Johan, welcome in. It's a P2 for you here at the end of this race at Aragon. How about you talk us through the challenges that you and all the rest of the racers had to face out there here tonight?
Yeah, I really didn't think I was going to be on the podium for this race. The wet was really a challenge. All of my practice races were dreadful, so I really wasn't expecting a podium, but I'm happy about that. Yeah.
I can imagine you are quite pleased. I want to ask you about the changing conditions of this racetrack, as all throughout we saw heavy rain in the early stages, then it dried out rather quickly with those howling winds and glaring sun. By the end, this was basically a dry racetrack. So I want to ask you how it was trying to stay on top of that throughout this race.
Yeah, the big question was, do you switch to dries? And my strategy was to pit very late. I'm actually pretty good on tires, so I think when I pit, there was still 70% left. So my strategy was just to save those extra 20 seconds in the pit and bring it home on the same tires.
Yeah, worked out pretty well for you, getting a P2 here in this race at Aragon, an unknown quantity for all of the racers up and down the grid, but nice to see you get a good result here. Going to ask you about the next round of the championship, though, at Zolder. That's also a bit of an unknown quantity, used to host Formula One, but doesn't get a lot of love on iRacing, despite the fact it just got a fresh lick of paint a couple of seasons ago, if my memory serves me correctly. So what are your thoughts heading to that track next time out?
I have no idea. I haven't done a single lap yet on Zolder, so that's tomorrow's activity, start the practice for Zolder. But I would like to give a shout out to some people, my wife, who puts up with my quote-unquote hobby, all of the instructors, Doug and the steering team. We really have an awesome program for bringing up folks and improving their abilities. For a couple of years, I struggled in the middle of the pack, and all of a sudden I'm up in the front, and that's a testament to the program. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for joining us here in the broadcast booth, Johan. Congratulations on P2 here at Aragon, and looking forward to seeing you out there on the racetrack at Zolder next time out.
All right, thank you.
And that right there was Johan Nye, our P2 finisher here in this race. And before we wrap up the show, let's have a chat with Anthony DiVincenzo, our P3 finisher here in this race. Anthony, welcome in. P3 for you, and a pretty wild one tonight. How was it out there?
Did you guys see that? That was crazy.
Yeah, we did. We're keeping focus on you. We were able to get the webcam feed and everything to see the body language in real time. Pretty good view into how topsy-turvy one of these 1 hour long races can be.
I can't tell you how many emotions I just went through in the last hour. There were highs and lows. I didn't know if it was rain or tears that I was trying to see through for a while. And then, I just took a risk with my coach to switch it to dries, and then suddenly I was a rocket ship.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that decision to switch to dries. I've asked pretty much everybody else about staying on top with the changing conditions, but I want to ask you about the decision to switch on to dries, because as was pointed out by our wonderful producer, Mr. Hugo Luis, right towards the end of that race, you were up to 5 seconds quicker than everybody else. So how was it just basically running this race on easy mode towards the end?
It was really strange, I kind of figured, what do we got to lose? Let's see what's going to happen. I was sitting pretty for a first while. I had an unfortunate incident that wasn't my fault that knocked me back. And then I had one that was totally my fault that put me way in the end. And it was like, we needed a Hail Mary pass. So we saw the weather pattern was going away, and that we had gone from moderately wet to dry and all this. And we put them on, and suddenly there was just grip. I had a 14 wing on, which was helping me a lot in the corners, and plus the tires and the conditions of the tarmac. And it really kind of felt like I was cheating at times. I just couldn't believe how much grip was out there. When I saw where we were on the white flag lap, I just said, let's send it. And we closed that gap and took third. I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's a darn good drive for you all throughout, and it's going to give you a bit of momentum heading off into the next round of the season at Zolder. Round number 6 of the 7-round championship. So getting into crunch time, what are your thoughts heading there next time out?
I was looking at the points, I think I'm fourth going into this round. And, I know that Antonio, he had surgery, man. I hope you heal up well. With Team Max Schnell, we're missing you out there. I know he had a lot of talent. He'd probably be on the podium if he was healthy. So, but I'm happy to be here where I am. I think that the championship is going to be really close and challenged. People should tune in and watch this, man. It's going to be a great story the next 2 rounds.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to be on the edge of my seat here in the broadcast booth. We have had fine races up to this point, expecting some fantastic action in the final 2 rounds. Anthony, thank you for joining us here in the booth, and congratulations on the P3 run.
Thank you so much. Thanks, PCA. Thanks to my coaches. Joachim, thank you for helping me out tonight. And thanks to my wife for letting me enjoy this hobby. Peace out, guys.
There we go, man. Happy wife, happy life. That right there was Anthony DiVincenzo joining us here in the broadcast booth. And that right there, folks, brings to a close the Aragon chapter from Series 14 of the PCA Sim Racing Series here at the end of 2025. Next time you'll be able to catch the action from the PCA Challenge class will be at Circuit Zolder on November the 20th for round number 6 of the season. As we get closer and closer to the end, not going to have to worry about rain, but going to have to worry about the challenges of that very tricky old Formula One track that I personally love, but can be a bit like Marmite. Once again, I want to give some thanks to Princess Cruises, the PCA title sponsor. I want to thank the steering committee here at Porsche Sim Racing, and also want to thank the wonderful producer that I have had the privilege of doing this broadcast with tonight, Mr. Hugo Luis, working all the cameras and the graphics in the virtual production hauler. It's been a fantastic night of racing action, and hopefully all of you tuning into the show on RaceSpot have thoroughly enjoyed it. And if you have, how about you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss out on any of the PCA action. But as for this broadcast here for round number 5 of the PCA Sim Racing Series Challenge Class season here from Aragon, that will just about do it. So for myself, Ron Mullins, I say thank you all so very much for tuning into the action here tonight, and we hope to see you all wherever it is in the not too distant future.